Welcome to the Consulting Leaders Podcast, where we talk about the business of consulting. Whether you're looking to grow your practice or learn from the stories of leaders in consulting, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Guillaume Jouvencel, ex-PwC and co-founder of GHA Marketing. Join me as I interview the best consultants in their niche. Let's get on with the show. Terry, welcome to Consulting Leaders. Happy to have you.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Let's jump straight into it.
Yeah.
What's the origin story? What got you into consulting, Terry?
Well, it's funny. It's kind of what got me into entrepreneurship, I guess. But what got me into this part of it was I have been entrepreneurial my whole life, and I've been really fortunate to have some successes. And now that I'm in midlife, which I don't recommend getting older for what it's worth, it's no fun. But now that I got there, what really got me into this side of, we kind of call it advisory, is I realized there's a lot of companies out there that could really help and benefit from the use of an advisory board. And I sort of set up a company that I wish I had. I wish I had an advisory board like this when I was going through my entrepreneurial journey and different exits. I've been fortunate to have some. But so I looked back and said, wow, what if I had a board that could, advisors or consultants or however you look at it, that could really help me get better outcomes, get further faster, create shortcuts, have less stress. And so I created Future-Proof Advisors to do that.
What's the problem that you're solving with that? What is it that you help people achieve, basically?
Yeah, I think that's the big piece of it. I think the number one thing is the inherent loneliness that comes with being an entrepreneur and all the things that surround it, right? So when you're in it, you sometimes don't even realize you're in it, right? And you don't even recognize the loneliness. But now for me, having had 2 exits to public companies, having worked in big corporations at a senior level and been on my own, I felt like I sort of had enough to offer to give back. So when you say the problem we're solving, what I find often with entrepreneurs and people that we consult or advise, I find that they'll have a lot of business goals, but they don't always match those goals to their personal goals. And sometimes they're not in concert with one another. So one of the biggest problems we solve is zooming out with a company and really looking at their North Star goals, but matching the personal with the business so that the business can serve them rather than the common trap everybody falls into where they wind up serving the business. So I always find that the personal gets left out. So that's where we kind of start. And then you can build out strategic initiatives and things and future-proof them forward. But that's the one piece. And then ongoing, it's being an accountability partner, like a true advisory board. So we're not just consulting, right? We're not just, I'm going to help you do this and this. It's oftentimes the entrepreneur quits, or is their own boss, but oftentimes they want a boss or they want some kind of structure. So there's also that accountability partner is another problem we're solving. Do you find that when you're talking to people, and is that something that you hear? Oh, hold on, you're muted, or I don't hear you.
Okay, no, I was muted indeed. I mean, I can relate to a lot of things that you're saying, Terry. So Yes, 100%. I think so. From my side, since you're asking, I think accountability. I got used to being disciplined, and my mentor is like huge on this as well. So like even when I don't feel like it, I'm gonna do it. Accountability is still good, right? To be around people who cheer you up, who are like you, who are trying to achieve the same thing as you. Community is important. The loneliness aspect of entrepreneurship is really something that, I don't think anything can prepare you for. In my case, I do this with a business partner, so with 2, but still, like it's very different than when you work corporate, for instance, or at PwC when I was before. So yeah, that that hits the mark 100%. Do you have a specific type of people you're helping, like entrepreneurs, but do you have a niche? Do you have a company size that you're targeting? Like what profile do you typically work with?
We focus very specifically in the areas that we've had successes in, because we feel like, okay, if we're going to talk the talk, we better have walked the walk. So we focus specifically on marketing and services agencies, which is where I had sort of my first exit, and then also SaaS businesses where I had my most recent exit. And we usually look for mid-market. So we found that for big companies, there's lots of consulting firms, et cetera. And for startups, there's everybody looking to help, because it's whether it's VCs, investors, or people looking for the next big thing. And then we found this niche that's the mid-market, where we feel like this is the future and this is like the heartbeat of entrepreneurship, but it often gets overlooked when it comes to advisors, consultants, things like that. So we look for that mid-market in those two verticals, and we typically work with companies that are already at about a $2 million EBITDA profit level. So meaning they've gotten somewhere, they're good, they're making a good living, but the question is, can they get from that 2 million to 10 million? And where do they want to go next? So that's how we pick them. And we're very fortunate that we get to pick we call them members, the companies that we work with in our community. And our partner is typically always like the founder, the owner, the CEO, because we're working at that level, sort of like an advisory board. And that's kind of how we do it.
Preach. That's all I have to say. I mean, I will die on that hill, and I'm fighting every day. Customers and non-customers are dishing down, and at the end of the day, why should people believe you, right? Well, it's because of the successes that you had in the past. So if you have a way to prove who you've helped and with what results, what outcome, and then focusing 100% on this type of people, is how companies and specifically consultants and B2B coaches are going to win. I mean, that's my opinion.
Yeah, I agree.
So I think that's going to be a masterclass, which I like. How do you market, Terry? How do you market? How do you brand? How do you get in front of those? So consulting firm owners, SaaS owners, like, what has worked for you to get the attention of your leads?
We've been incredibly fortunate over our several years where everything has come as far as a referral or word of mouth. And we're very, very fortunate that way. We don't take it for granted. And we sort of have this no jerks policy, right? Of like, we only want to work with good human beings and good people. And that's kind of how we are. And we've been lucky that way. But I would say, if I'm you, you'd say, well, come on, not everybody could do that. How is that? And so the reason that we do it and everything we do to quote unquote market ourselves is just to always provide value and always try to share information that's helpful. So we'll publish things or we'll do things, or like, for instance, you just mentioned masterminds. I'm hosting a mastermind coming up with all CEOs, just trying to be helpful. And it's coming from the most sincere place. Like, again, I've been fortunate to have been successful. So now my pleasure in life is helping others be successful and helping others, like, maybe not make mistakes that I've made. And so there's a moment just recently last week where somebody was going through something and I had this flashback of like, oh, I had that exact thing happen where somebody sued me, somebody wasn't happy, and I now I understand, 15 years later, why that happened, so that I can help you in this moment, and I can help you avoid this pitfall or this potential problem. That's very helpful, and it gives me pleasure, to be honest, but it also helps them. But again, trying to be adding value.
How do you move the conversation forward then? Because if it's purely thought leadership based, if it's purely value based, how do you go from this value to a conversation?
Yeah.
A sales conversation.
Yeah.
An SOW, a letter of engagement. Like, what does sales motion look like for you guys, Terry?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and it's really important in that case to have it be a two-way street. I mean, sometimes, like in our case, and I used to do this even when I ran a big digital agency, et cetera, if you try to take the mindset yourself that you're the buyer, you're not necessarily the seller, right? And you're vetting, it's a two-way street, right? You're vetting each other for, will this be a good fit? Will there be a good value exchange? So that's number one, is kind of how we'll take that conversation, which it starts with me. Do I want to work with this person? And more importantly, can we help them? We've set up this network, right? So it's not just us as advisors, but I always jokingly say I've set up the Justice League of America, of like a bunch of superheroes who also help as part of our advisory network. And so I'm like, will this person benefit from what we do? Can we help them? And then let's assume we all agree, like to your point, then we like to do what I honestly, there's no better term than just call it a dating period. We just try to say, hey, let's do one thing. Let's not get married first. Let's tackle an issue. What is one pressing issue that you have? And let's try to tackle that. Let's put a tight time frame around it. Nothing like binding, nothing stressful. And let's see if we can, help you with that problem. That way you can see how we work, we can see how you work. And more importantly for us, do we believe in this business? Do we believe in them in the long term? Because oftentimes, if you become an advisory board, you are getting married. So it gives us all the ability to date before we get married. And it seems just more comfortable. It's also more actionable. And we like that because it's usually if somebody's coming to somebody like me or to you or whatever, they usually have some burning question or some big problem that they want to solve. And so we're like, all right, screw it. Let's try and help you with that problem. And let's see how we work together. And then we can evolve it or we cannot. That's how we do it.
So it's kind of try it before you buy it with a few extra steps.
Yeah, that's a really, a good way to put it. It's just, but I guess what I would say is it's a two-way street of that. And I think I noticed this with other consultant types. They're in sales mode. And I would recommend, have it be a two-way street. Really vet each other and really try to understand each other because, life's too short for the rest of it. So you just try to figure out, will there really be a valuable exchange here that benefits everybody? And if it does, then it's great. And there's a book that I read, someone gave it to me about 10 years ago called The Go Giver. So rather than the Go Getter, and it's a Go Giver. And I really live by that, which is just be helpful. Try to be of use, of value to somebody, and then good things happen. And that's sort of our mantra.
Yeah. I'm going to double down on that because I think this is so important. And don't get me wrong, I think there is a thin line, especially for B2B coaches and consultants, to respect when it comes to your advice. Your coaching literally is the product. So whilst you want to keep on building that relationship, that authority, whilst you're in the relationship building cycle, not to call it the sales cycle, you want to give enough so that you help the person genuinely. You want them to win, but you also keep some in reserve so that there is meaning in like purchasing your services and working with you. That said, and that's a bit more to the content side of things where we operate, people are scared of like giving away too much. And I'm like, if people take your advice, go home, implement it, and get results without you or for free, you didn't lose. You actually reinforced so much authority in front of that person so that when they get in front of the next problem, which will happen, and you say, hey, you should do this, they are much more likely to comply. And when this, you should do this is like, hey, we should work together because, you got this. This is something you can get on your own, but now let's work together on this. They are much more likely to comply. I think giving this value, you need to be fine and at peace with the fact that you're going to get some people who are going to take and they're not going to purchase from you. And you need to be at peace with that. As soon as you start content, let me rephrase, as soon as you start valuable content, this is the name of the game anyways. But then it becomes, how do we help as many people as possible get into our funnel, help them out, and some of them will buy, and that will make the whole thing worthwhile.
Yeah.
Once you do that sample test, I keep on calling it like this. I understand it's a bit more complex than this.
No, it's good.
Once you do this, Terry, how do you move forward with the bigger project and then the other project and then the recurring business with those clients? How do you do that?
I think the number one thing is you got to stay focused on them, their goals, their needs, and getting them the outcomes they desire. I think often what I see consultants do, or even us as sort of advisors in the past, you're thinking, look, every human being inherently thinks of themselves first, right? It's just sort of natural, right? But if you can sort of divorce yourself from that, right? And just focus on them, literally like you're a Martian that just came in from another planet, and you are just observing these people, and your sole goal is, how do I help them? I have to understand them, and I have to understand their needs, their goals, their outcomes. and I'm purely focused on them and delivering value in where they need help, and I lose my own, let's call it, insecurities, questions, oh, I've got to sell this to make my numbers. Screw that. Just focus on them, and lots of good things happen. And it's hard to do, but if you can purely give of yourself there, I find that practice alone will inherently make it where you're providing so much value that you become indispensable. But I would say, if it doesn't work when you provide all that value, or you're focused that, then maybe it's not a good match, and then it is what it is. Then you move on, and it's not dead. But I think that one piece is important, and then there's a second component to that, which is you've got to be honest. You've got to be brutally honest, and that sometimes comes in the form of tough love, because maybe you're going to tell somebody something that they don't want to hear, but they need to hear. And it's also be an accountability partner, like really drive an agenda, because somebody's bringing you in as a consultant or as an advisor because they respect you or they need help. But I do often find that then the consultant, if you will, goes into like defense mode, or I don't want to get fired mode, or I want to make sure that I have this deal for another year mode. And that might prevent them. So then they start telling their client, if you will, what they want to hear, maybe just in a self-preservation. And rather than, if they can just unfilter, this is something that we'll do, is just like, well, what if we don't care? What if we don't need the money? What if we, and again, you just put yourself in their shoes. What did they tell me they need? And what did they ask me to hold them accountable to? And then you still do it. And we can have very difficult conversations, but that's the job, and I think some people lose that because they're on their own end as a consultant, they're trying to build business, and which makes complete sense. But if you just focus on them and you be brutally honest and useful, I would say way more often than not, good things happen, and the good thing in that case would be an ongoing long-term relationship. Do you find that on your end, or am I delusional?
No, so on my end, it's interesting because obviously this evolves, but I think to give a bit of a perspective that consultants will be able to relate to. I think what you're describing here is the abundance mindset. When you have, it's never going to be a gazillion opportunities knocking on the door, but when you have a steady pipeline of potential deals, when people want to work with you, when you're in demand, rather than not knowing to do of all your supply, you're also much more comfortable having those hard conversations and being honest, like, hey, looks like this is not the right fit, and that's all right. I don't want to take more of your money, and we're probably not going to be able to help anyways. There is a joke that Hussam, my co-founder, and I often go by, which is when you start a business or when you start an acquisition channel because you rely on referral for a while and then you want to take a certain next level, you're going to take anybody with a pulse and a credit card because you need to grow.
That's right.
And pulse is optional. Eventually, when you get into this abundance mindset where you're growing steadily, you're hiring people to do the delivery, but at a reasonable pace, which means that you can maintain the level of quality, you're much more able to have those hard conversations. I'm just saying this because I couldn't agree more with you, Terry, and I think that's the way to go about it. The way to make it realistic and reasonable for people to consider as well, I think, is when you've solved the acquisition channel problem, the acquisition problem of your business, so that you know that you can say no to an existing client because you can focus on value. Because if they don't take you on the offer, there's going to be someone else who does. I think solving that problem by acquisition is a good way to think about. Now I can 100% focus on value. And back to the very thing that we started this interview with, which is when you focus only on the people that you can get great results for, you also know what you need to do to get results for them. And therefore you're able to say, hey, we're not going to be able to help because, X, Y, Z are not checked. It was a bit of a long rant and a bit messy. That's how I think about it.
No, and I agree with you completely. And it speaks so much to, our value of future-proofing a business. And where we try to distinguish ourselves is,
Mhm.
and it just works a lot for us. So maybe I'm arrogant in what I'm saying, but the reality is I've had the exit of a marketing agency. I've had the exit as a SaaS business. So I can speak from my own experience. I'm not just making this up. And because of that, I think we get a little bit of extra and probably deserved credibility from the people that we're helping, of like,
100%.
okay, they get it. And then we're very open of like, I'm like, okay, here's where I screwed this completely up, and let me help you understand what I did wrong and what could hurt, or here's the move that we made that really worked, or here's what this, oftentimes we're working with companies that want to have an exit in the next 3 to 5 years. Let's just say that's often, people we deal with. And we'll talk to them about, well, here's what will create your enterprise value. Here's something you need to do. Here's something I did that worked, and that little piece of it can really help give us maybe a differentiated edge in helping people. So that's why we like to give back. Yeah.
This is so good. So something I've never said on the show yet is that now the way we work, so we constantly reinvest into our training, into masterminds, into getting into the rooms with people who've done what we're trying to achieve every time we take the next step, because we want to buy this time, these mistakes of others.
Yeah.
And one thing that we've decided to do I'd say 10 months ago, which we're living by and getting crazy results, is we're only gonna purchase training, mentoring, masterminds from people who either have done themselves what we are trying to do, starting at the same point, or even better, done that and helped other people like us achieve what we want to achieve.
Yeah.
I think at the end of the day, that's what Steve Jobs was saying around consulting. And obviously I'm coming from consulting and I help consultants, but it's like consultants will see a banana in 2D, whereas the people walking the day-to-day will see the banana in 3D. So yes, they have some perspective about it, but they're not in the day-to-day doing the nitty-gritty. I think being able to working with someone who's seen the banana in 3D and who's done what we're trying to achieve and who's walking the talk or talking the walk, however we say, so important. So
yeah,
and obviously this should bring you some credibility as well, right? You've done 2 exits, which means you know something or two about business.
It means I got lucky, but it's all good.
It's funny. The people who make it, they always say this, but since I'm walking the talk, I can also say there's going to be a component of luck, tons of grit, and a lot of skills as well.
Yeah, that is true. And it speaks to something else when people are back to your vetting people who for clients, and just if I can help give advice to consultants.
Please.
One of the things I often see is you'll always meet them. They need the help. There's no doubt. But what you really want to figure out is, do they actually want the help? And it's such an important distinction. It's one of the things we vet. Like, they have to need the help, but they also have to want it, which means they're going to be receptive to it. And that's really, really important. So that's something else you want to vet for, and even ask. Like, I get that.
How do you do that?
It. Yeah, go ahead.
How do you do that, Terry? How do you vet that they want it?
I openly ask. I'm just like, okay, here, let me tell you a story. Somebody comes to me, they know they need it, they want to scale their business, and then we talk to them about, okay, but you haven't scaled your business, let's call it, in the last 5 years, and you're coming to us to future-proof and help you grow. What do you think is that barrier? Well, I can't do this, I can't do that. Okay, but if I told you all these things, would you be receptive to it? Would you go do it? All these different things, and you just try to figure out, no, I want it. I've come to the place now, typically, they'll say, I've come to the place now where I recognize I don't need to know everything. I want this help, and I want to implement that stuff, and I want to put myself in someone else's hands. Sometimes people just go down this path of, oh, I can't figure it out, I better hire a consultant. But they don't really want to listen, or they don't really want to implement it, but they want to tick that box to say they did it. And so a lot of it has to do with mindset. And that's why I come back to the personal and professional goals. If you really understand them as a person, because what do they always say? It's like 80% of the business it's the psychology of the owner is 80% of it. Is once you understand that, then it can really, really be helpful. And it's really fun. when somebody's willing to be that way. And I would say also as the advisor or the consultant, you should be willing to be that way. Somebody else gives you feedback and you might be able to learn from it. But that's one of the big distinctions, is they got to need it, which is typically there, but you got to make sure they want it.
I like so that's in my sales training, we call this sitting in the pain. And you need to get them to realize, and I think that's applicable, which is why I'm doubling down on it, to any consultant, especially when we get longer sales cycle, like dealing with enterprise level deals. You need to make them understand, okay, what's the benefit of doing this? And what's the costs over the next 6 to 12 months of not doing this?
That's right.
And then to realize that it's just about taking action, regardless of the service, to actually... That happens at the end of the day when the pain of the existing situation becomes greater than the pain of change.
That's right.
But it's like leading them there eventually.
But that pain construct is so valuable. So I love that you just talked about it, because that always helps people. And then the other thing to dig into is the emotional needs, right? You can make the biggest rational, case for anything, but usually, especially when it comes to an exit or a deal, there's emotion in there, and coupled with emotion is often ego. And if you can help deal with those pieces as a good advisor, like in our cases, we wind up doing, it's kind of a hybrid. It's coaching, it's advising, it's consulting, it's networking. That's again, I set up the company that I wish I had 15 years ago, all these different things. But that oftentimes you can break down something exactly how you just described it. And then when you build on it with the emotion, like just trying to unpack what's going on, it's helpful. I can tell you a story if it's helpful on something like that.
Please.
We had one where, a company had an unbelievably attractive offer, and they had built something up, and they were frustrated that the multiple wasn't higher on the deal, the valuation. And sure, there could have been multiples out there that may have been higher, they had heard about higher, but when it came to, like, this is what we work with people on, what is your North Star goal? How much money do you need? What do you want to make? What do you want out of this? This deal surpassed that. So they were going to be set. But in their mind, it was like, but the deal could be better. But somebody else got there and was better. And our point to them was, hey, that may be true, but this is all about timing, and your timing is great. And this still achieves all your goals. And you better be careful, because if you pass this up, things can change. And the business can change. The M&A marketplace can change. And they're so focused on winning, is what I would say. Just so focused on, I got to win the deal. I got to have the best deal, the best multiple, that they passed on this deal. And I would tell you today, a few years later, the business is worth maybe half as much. Maybe. And they would kill for that deal that was there. But so they learned something, right? And again, everybody's okay, everybody will be fine. But it's one of those experiences that an expectation or a desire to win, or an emotional, like, screw them, they screwed me on this, can get in the way of just making a good business move. And that's, again, a good consultant, a good advisor, a good coach can hopefully help somebody get over that. So I hope that helps.
Amen.
That little story.
Amen to that.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this, Terry.
Yeah.
What's after two exits, two very different business models, service versus SaaS. With your current practice, what is your number one challenge right now? What's the one that you're trying to crack?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, and thanks for that. I think that the number one thing is the quality of the companies, right? And then it comes to the quality of the leaders. And what I mean by that is back to they got to need the help and want the help. Then there's another component. Can they do it? Will they do it, right? And that's what we're betting on, right?
Yeah.
We're vetting, and we're trying to help them get there. But so we often say, and we've had this, like, no one's perfect. And look, most businesses fail. But I would say, where we're stuck is being able to figure out, what's the saying? You can lead the horse to water, right? So in some cases in our past, we've led the horse to water, and then we've taken the horse's head and we've dunked it in the water, and said, here's how to do it. But the horse still couldn't figure out how to drink the water. And that would be an area where they're still stuck. I would say we have way, way less of that situation now than we did, like back to your point of if they had a credit card and a pulse, right? So you figure those things out along the way. But when we're stuck, I would just say it's helping us unstick the company we're working with would be the area where sometimes we find we're stuck because we're like, like I want to help him. Then maybe there's some secret or some trick that we haven't figured out yet, to help them. So that's one of the areas where it's just how can we be better at getting them to implement and then holding them accountable to a certain timeline and plan. Because look, we've all been there in mid-market businesses. Things happen, emergencies happen, crises happen, and it starts to delay you from your achieving your North Star. And our job is to keep people accountable to it. But that's one of the areas where we can sometimes get stuck. How about you? Do you find stuff like that?
So I love this back and forth that you provoke on this podcast, Terry. I like this a lot. Yeah, for sure. I mean, at the end of the day, it all comes down to, are you acquisition constrained, like demand constrained, or are you supply constrained? My number one challenge right now is how do we scale this? And that's the classic. How do we scale this? So we want to increase demand, obviously, like always, like we have a steady flow, but we want more. Duh. But it's also how do we, as we grow and we manage, multiple dozens of podcasts at any point in time now, how do we do this whilst maintaining the level of quality? So when you have a smaller team, you can for sure train them up and review everything. And eventually you're going to have a few superstars who are going to be able to do a super job for the key accounts and so on. But the point is not to just take good care of the key accounts, it's to take good care of everyone. And the leaders, the middle management, that's coming from PwC. I really thought this was never going to be the case, but now I see the point of middle management. And having those middle managers being star players, not at delivery, but at managing people and making people being star player at delivery. So it's keep on getting that steady flow of leads and of new business, but also making sure that we can. I don't think the marketing agency model is ever going to be like supply constrained, like you just hire more people, but quality supply constraint is a thing. So that's what I'm thinking about right now. So maybe not at the level yet where we need leaders, although that will come, hopefully. But like that good middle management, potentially a director of ops, delivering fantastic work. Yeah. And that's at the end of the day, if you want to sell your company, you need to remove completely yourself from the business. So
that's right.
Remove the key man risk.
Yep.
And that's what we all want to build. I mean, anybody who wants to sell their business want to build towards that at some point, I guess.
I will say what you said to me. Amen. Yeah.
Terry Dry, ladies and gentlemen. Terry, if people want to find out more about you, see what you do, future-proof their business, where should they go?
Feel free to follow me on LinkedIn, just at Terry Dry, or also go to our website, Future Proof Advisors. You can learn a bit more, and hopefully this is helpful. And follow our business on LinkedIn as well, because we publish a lot of content that we hope can be helpful.
I'm going to say one thing for sure is that you've gained at least one new connection on LinkedIn out of this interview, Terry. I've just added you.
Yeah,
Terry,
likewise.
Thank you so much for coming on Consulting Leaders.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Consulting Leaders Podcast. We hope you learned valuable lessons on how to grow your practice and take your business to the next level. Make sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you're listening to this show so you never miss an episode. To apply and be a guest on the show, click the link in the description. See you next time.
How was